Welcome back to Audible Archives. I'm Raul, your host, and tonight, we wander into the cold mists of Transylvania, where superstition meets the supernatural. A lone traveler, a storm, and a graveyard drenched in moonlight. This is the path that leads toward Dracula's shadow. The night is waiting, and fear has many shapes. This is Dracula's Guest by Bram Stoker. Before we begin, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, because in stories like these, curiosity is the first step toward the grave. The sun poured molten gold over Munich, turning the city's rooftops into mirrors of light. Summer had just begun to stretch its limbs. The air shimmered with that crisp, exhilarating warmth that makes everything feel alive and new. The hum of the streets lingered faintly behind us as the carriage waited at the entrance of the Hotel Cotter Saisons. Herr Delbruck, the maitre d'hotel, emerged, bareheaded, waistcoat slightly undone, the kind of man who carried his authority like perfume. He leaned on the carriage door with a courteous smile. "Enjoy your drive," he said, a voice low but carrying. Then, to the coachman, "Back before nightfall, Johann. The sky's clear now, but the north wind bites. Storms come quick this time of year." His gaze flicked upward. "And, well, you know what night it is." Johann stiffened slightly, touching the brim of his cap. "Ja, Mainher." With that, he snapped the reins and we rolled away. Munich fell behind in waves of sunlight and cobblestone echo. Once the last church spire dipped below the horizon, I signaled Johann to halt. "What night is it?" asked. He hesitated. Then, with a quick cross over his chest, muttered, "Walpurgis Night." The word seemed to chill the air itself. He drew out a heavy silver watch, one of those oversized relics that looked like it could tell the time for an entire century, and frowned at the hands before flicking an impatient glance my way. The gesture said, "You're wasting daylight." I leaned back, amused, and gestured him onward. He urged the horses into a brisk trot. The wind was stronger now, carrying with it the scent of rain and something colder, metallic, distant, like fear. The road cut across a desolate plateau where the grass bowed to the invisible force of the gale. Every so often the horses tossed their heads, snorting, nostrils wide, as if they caught a scent that didn't belong to this world. Then I saw it, a narrow track splitting off from the main road, vanishing into a curling valley below. The shadows there were softer, darker, almost inviting. I felt an odd tug, a sense of something forgotten calling from beyond the ridge. "Stop," I said. Johann obeyed reluctantly, muttering under his breath. His hands trembled slightly as he gestured to the side road. "No, sir," he said, shaking his head. "That way not good." He crossed himself again. His nervousness only sharpened my curiosity. "What's down there?" I pressed. He gave a base of answers, each one shorter than the last, his eyes flicking again and again to that great silver watch. The hands crept forward, the sky darkened a shade, and the wind whispered through the grass like distant voices. Finally, I smiled and said, "Well, Johann," I said, my curiosity outweighing caution, "I want to go down this road. You needn't come if you'd rather not. But at least tell me why you don't want to." Before I could blink, Johann leapt down from the coachman's seat, boots crunching against gravel. He stretched his hands toward me, not commanding, but pleading. "Bit her, don't go, not that way." His voice trembled, thick with an accent that turned every word into a half-whispered warning. He kept glancing toward the shadowed valley, then back at me, as though the very air might overhear us. I caught fragments of his mixed tongue, English laced with German, disjointed but clear enough to grasp his meaning. Every time his courage swelled enough to speak plainly, He faltered, eyes wide, breath shallow, and crossed himself. Walpurgis Night, he murmured, like the word itself was a spell of protection or a curse. I tried reasoning with him, but conversation was a labyrinth of broken sentences and rising fear. His English frayed whenever emotion took him, tumbling back into German, each outburst punctuated by another glance at his great silver watch, ticking far too loudly in the silence between us. The horses began to prance and snort, tossing their mammals as though the wind had teeth. Johann's face drained of color. He seized the bridles and dragged the team several paces forward, away from where we had stopped. The motion was so sudden, so frantic that I followed instinctively. "Why?" I asked, breath catching in the sharp, electric air. He pointed to the ground we just left, crossing himself again. His voice was a rasp. "Dort begraben. There buried him what killed themselves." He gestured to the fork where the two roads met, tracing a cross in the air with a trembling finger. The phrase clicked in my mind. Buried at the crossroads. The old superstition. "Ah, a suicide?" I said, forcing a tone of detached curiosity. How fascinating. But my voice felt thin against the heavy silence that followed. The horses jerked suddenly, ears twitching, nostrils flaring. From somewhere far off, the stillness broke with a sound, part bark, part yelp, the kind of cry that doesn't belong to any tame creature. The air itself seemed to shiver. Johann froze. "I'm wolf," he whispered, then added in halting English, "It sounds like wolf, but no wolves here. Not now." The wind carried the sound again, closer this time, laced with a strange echo that made the hairs on my arms rise. The last light of the sun faltered behind a wall of clouds, and for the first time since we'd left Munich, the day no longer felt like summer, felt like waiting. "Now?" I asked, raising a brow. "Surely it's been years since wolves came this close to Munich?" Johann shook his head, stroking the horses' necks as they tossed and shivered. Long, he said softly. "In spring and summer, no wolves. But when the snows come, they come too. Not so long ago." Even as he spoke, the air shifted. Above us, dark clouds began to gather with eerie speed, blotting out the sun's warmth. The world dimmed for an instant. A flicker, a warning. A chill swept past like a ghost's breath, enough to make the horses stamp and snort. Then, just as quickly, the light returned, too bright, too clean, as though pretending nothing had happened. Johann lifted a hand to shade his eyes, staring toward the horizon. "The snowstorm. He comes soon," he murmured. He checked his silver watch again, then wrapped the reins tight in his fists and climbed back onto the coachman's seat. The horses were still uneasy, hooves scraping at the ground as if they could feel something beneath it. I lingered beside the carriage, unwilling to let my curiosity die so easily. "Tell me," I said, pointing down the narrow, shadowed road. "About that place. Where does it lead?" He froze. The prayer came first, murmured words quick and fearful, his hand sketching the sign of the cross. Then, in a voice that trembled like the leaves before a storm, he said, "It is unholy." "What is unholy?" Oppressed. "The village," he whispered. My interest sharpened. "Then there is a village?" "No. No one lives there. Not for hundreds of years." I frowned. "But you said there was one." "There was," he said, his voice breaking. "Where is it now?" At that, the floodgates opened. Words spilled from him. German tangled with broken English, half confession, half fever dream. I caught fragments. Long ago, the dead that would not stay buried. Graves whispering with breath. Villagers found alive beneath the earth, their lips red, their faces flushed as though they had just fed. His voice cracked when he said, "They ran. Those who lived, they ran from that place to where the living were truly living, and the dead were dead, and not something." He stopped, unable to finish. Fear had its hand around his throat. The color drained from his face as he clutched the reins like a lifeline. Sweat gleamed on his brow despite the cold wind. And then, as though the horror of his own story had grown too large to contain, Johann's voice broke into a shout. A cry of pure, desperate terror that shattered the uneasy calm of the plain. "Walpurgis Night!" Johann cried, his voice raw with fear. He pointed frantically at the carriage, urging me to get in. That single word, half warning, half curse, stirred something stubborn in me. Every thread of English pride bristled. I straightened, chin high. "You're afraid, Johann?" I said, forcing calm into my tone. "Then go home. I'll walk. The exercise will do me good." The carriage door swung open. I reached in, took my oak walking stick, the same one that had been my companion on countless wanderings, and shut the door behind me. Pointing down the road toward Munich, I said firmly, "Go home, Johann. Walpurgis Night doesn't concern Englishmen." The horses were beyond control now. Eyes rolling white, nostrils flaring, hooves striking sparks off the stones. Johann struggled to calm them, pleading in a torrent of German that had long since abandoned any trace of English. The words poured out like a prayer, like desperation given voice. Couldn't help it. I laughed. The sound felt strange in that hollow wind. His panic was so complete, so unreasonable, it was almost absurd. When I said, "Home," and motioned down the main road, he hesitated only a moment longer before climbing back to his seat. With a final, despairing gesture toward me, he turned the team toward Munich. I leaned on my stick, watching him go. The wheels creaked. The harness jingled faintly in the still air. For a time, he and the carriage rolled away slowly, shrinking against the pale horizon. Then movement caught my eye. A shape cresting the hill beyond. A man, tall and unnaturally thin, standing in the road. Even from a distance, there was something wrong about him. His proportions stretched, his posture too still. As Johann drew near, the horses saw him. Their reaction was instant and violent. Rearing, shrieking, muscles straining against the reins. Johann shouted, pulling hard, but terror had already taken them. They bolted, carriage lurching wildly down the slope, wheels bouncing against the stones as they vanished into the distance. I stood frozen, the echo of their panic still ringing in the air. When I looked again for the tall stranger on the hill, he was gone. The road was empty. Only the wind moved now, whispering through the grass, carrying with it a scent of snow and something older. Something watching. With a light heart and the thrill of solitude in my veins, I turned down the narrow side road. The one Johann had begged me to avoid. His fears seemed absurd now. The valley below was drenched in stillness, wild and beautiful beneath the late afternoon sun. The deeper I went, the quieter the world became. I walked for hours without realizing it. No sound but my boots on the gravel and the occasional cry of a distant bird. No cottages, no travelers, not even a curl of smoke. Just emptiness. It was only when the road curved through a sparse ring of dark pines that I realized how oppressive the silence had become. Somewhere deep inside me, I'd already noticed it, the weight of desolation pressing in, but it was only now that I felt it fully. I sat on a fallen trunk, catching my breath. The air had turned sharper, colder. A faint, sighing murmur moved around me, like the valley itself was exhaling. High above, great banks of clouds were sweeping from north to south, rolling fast, thick and dark as iron. There was a strange, muffled roar far overhead, as though the storm was rehearsing its arrival in some unseen heaven. I shivered. At first, I blamed the stillness after walking, but the chill was deeper than that. A creeping cold that seemed to settle into the ground beneath my boots. I rose again, tightening my coat, and pressed on. The scenery changed as I moved forward, rugged yet hauntingly picturesque. There were no grand landmarks, nothing to catch the eye, and yet the land had a quiet allure, a kind of raw, untamed grace. I stopped thinking about time. By the time twilight began to thicken, reality returned in a soft rush. The sun was gone, the air colder, the wind keening faintly through the trees. The clouds above had grown heavier, dragging their shadows across the landscape. Every so often, that strange sound echoed again. The distant, mournful cry Johann had called a wolf. I hesitated at a fork where the road widened into open country. The hills rose in silent ranks around me, their slopes wrapped in dark forests that spilled down into the plain. Here and there, clusters of trees broke away from the mass, forming dark islands in a sea of fading grass. The road wound on, curving toward one of those thickets, a dense stand of trees that swallowed the path in darkness. My heart beat faster, not with fear but with the strange, electric curiosity that had guided me this far. Somewhere beyond that curtain of trees lay the village Johann had called unholy, and I meant to see it. A sudden shiver ran through the air, a thin, cutting breath from the north. Then the first flakes began to fall, soft and silent as ashes. Within moments the wind gathered its strength, and the world around me turned to a swirling white haze. I thought of the miles of empty country behind me, miles of loneliness, and pressed on toward the dark fringe of forest ahead. The sky had sunk to a bruised gray, heavy and low, and the snow was falling thick and fast, each flake catching the dim light before vanishing into the growing drift. In minutes, the road disappeared entirely beneath a pale, endless carpet that seemed to stretch into mist. I trudged forward, but the path had vanished. My boots no longer struck firm ground. Instead they sank into dead moss and hidden hollows. Somewhere along the way I had strayed, though I couldn't tell where. The wind rose, sharp as knives, slashing at my face and driving the snow sideways. Soon it became impossible to keep my eyes open for more than a heartbeat. Lightning flared across the sky, sudden, electric, tearing the heavens apart. In those blinding flashes, I glimpsed a dark shape ahead. A mass of trees, towering and spectral, their branches heavy with snow. Yews and cypresses, their trunks black against the white world, beckoned like silent sentinels. I staggered toward them, half blind, half frozen. The moment I crossed beneath their canopy, the sound changed. The screaming wind became a deep, distant roar, muffled by the weight of the trees. I leaned against a trunk, breath steaming in the dimness, and listened. The storm was breaking, its fury ebbed in sudden gusts, leaving behind an eerie, pulsing stillness. And within that stillness came the howls, low at first, then many, echoing from every direction. Wolves, or something trying to sound like them. The clouds thinned for a moment, and a jagged ray of moonlight pierced through, cold and silvery. The ground glittered under it, revealing what I had reached. The edge of a great cluster of yew and cypress. The snow had stopped. I stepped out from the trees, my breath clouding the moonlight, and began to explore. There were shapes here, stone cracked and leaning, half buried under ice. Old foundations, perhaps, or something older still. If ruins existed here, they might offer shelter from the cold. I followed the line of a low wall, fingers brushing the rough, icy stone, until I found a narrow break, an entrance. Beyond it stretched an alleyway of cypresses, dark and thick, leading toward a silhouette at the far end. A square shape, rising against the pale mist. A building, perhaps. Hope stirred in me, faint but real. Then the moon vanished again behind the clouds, plunging everything back into blackness. The wind cut colder, crawling down my spine. Still, I went on, one hand tracing the wall, the other gripping my walking stick. My boots crunched softly on snow as I advanced into the dark. Somewhere ahead, beyond the trees, the promise of shelter, and something else, waited. I froze. The world had gone still. The storm had bled itself dry, leaving behind a silence so absolute it felt like the air itself had stopped breathing. My own heartbeat stuttered, caught in that hush between thunder and memory. Then, like the moon, tore through the shreds of cloud, cold and merciless, spilling silver across a field of gravestones. I stood in a graveyard. The object before me, a marble tomb, rose from the snow like a frozen monument to forgotten sins. Its surface gleamed white beneath the moon, flawless and eternal. A sudden breath of wind sighed through the air, low and mournful, echoing like the cry of wolves lost in the dark. The storm was not gone. It was circling back, restless, alive. The temperature seemed to fall with every second. I could feel the cold crawl into my chest, gripping my heart in an icy fist. Drawn by a terrible fascination, I stepped closer. The tomb loomed taller with every heartbeat. Its marble face bore an inscription, carved deep above a heavy dark door. Countess Dolingen of Graz and Styria sought and found death 1801. The letters shimmered faintly beneath the moon, as if the stone itself remembered. And above it, dripping clean through the marble lid, stood a massive iron spike, black against the light, ancient and final. Circling around, I found more markings, engraved in bold Russian letters. The dead travel fast. The phrase sent a chill racing down my spine. The air felt charged, almost electric, the silence pulsing like something alive beneath the snow. My knees threatened to give. I wished, desperately, that I had listened to Johann, and then the truth struck me sharp as lightning. Walpurgis Night, that cursed night when the old world said the devil roamed free, when graves yawned open and the dead were invited to dance, when the shadows between earth, air, and water tore themselves loose and everything unholy came out to play. This was the very place Johann had feared, a village erased by time, the resting ground of suicides and outcasts. And here I stood, alone, trembling in a burial shroud of snow. As the wind began to wail again and the darkness gathered its strength, it took every shred of will, every whispered prayer, to stop myself from breaking, screaming, running. For in that moment, reason itself seemed to shrink beneath the weight of something older, colder, and infinitely cruel. And then the storm returned, not as mere wind or rain, but as a living fury. The earth trembled beneath me, 1,000 invisible hooves pounding in unison. The sky split open, and what came down were not flakes of snow, but shards of ice, hailstones the size of fists, slamming into the ground with the ferocity of war gems. They shattered branches, stripped bark from trees, and turned the world into a white chaos of noise and pain. I ran, blind and desperate, for the nearest shelter, a stand of cypress trees, but their thin limbs offered no mercy. The hail struck through them like bullets through glass. Driven by instinct, I stumbled toward the tomb, the marble structure that gleamed pale and cold in the storm's fury. The great dark doorway yawned open before me. I pressed myself into its shadow, flattening against the heavy bronze door. The wind screamed. The hail ricocheted off the marble in an endless metallic percussion. Yet even in that brutal storm, I felt a flicker of safety. until the door shifted beneath my weight, creaked inward. A chill unlike any other swept through me. Still, the promise of shelter outweighed the fear that coiled in my gut. I leaned in, peering into the darkness, and lightning tore across the sky, white fire splitting heaven and earth. For an instant that seared itself into my soul, I saw her, a woman lying on a bier within the tomb. Beautiful, eerily so. Her face soft with sleep, her lips stained the color of blood. She seemed carved from moonlight and memory. Then thunder roared like the voice of an ancient god, and an unseen force struck me full in the chest. I was thrown backwards, violently, flung into the storm as if snatched by the hand of a giant. The impact knocked the breath from me. I hit the ground, dazed, my mind reeling between fear and disbelief. And then, I felt it, that terrible awareness. I was not alone. I turned toward the tomb just as another flash ignited the world. The lightning struck the iron spike atop the marble vault. For one brief, blinding heartbeat, the tomb glowed, then cracked apart under the divine fire. The light poured through it, molten and furious. Within that inferno the woman rose. Her scream cut through the thunder, a cry of unbearable pain, and then it was gone, swallowed by the storm's roar. Something seized me again, unseen but overwhelming, dragging me across the ice-scoured ground. The world spun into sound and fury. The thunder above, the wolves howling like ghosts reborn, the hail pelting my skin like burning glass. My final glimpse before darkness took me was of movement all around, pale, shifting forms rising from the snow-covered graves. They came like a tide of the dead, phantoms wrapped in white, gliding through the storm, closing in, until everything dissolved into a blinding, endless blur of cold and silence. Consciousness returned in fragments, like shards of broken glass glinting in the dark. At first, there was only a dull awareness, a faint pulse in my skull. Then came the weight, the crushing heaviness that made every breath a struggle. My limbs refused to move. My feet screamed in agony, yet they might as well have belonged to someone else, for I could not feel them. The cold had claimed them long ago. An icy burn crept down the back of my neck, threading along my spine until even my ears throbbed with numb pain. And yet, at the center of it all in my chest, there was warmth. A cruel, deceptive warmth, like the last ember in a dying fire. I clung to it instinctively, even as the rest of my body faded into a deadened void. Time became meaningless. Seconds or hours might have passed. The world around me felt sealed in glass, motionless and airless. Then, darkness folded in deeper than before, and I must have slipped into unconsciousness. When I stirred again, nausea hit me first. A rolling sickness, primal and revolting. A sense of being trapped, of something pressing down on me that was not snow, not stone, but alive. The silence around was unbearable. The storm had gone, leaving behind a hollow stillness that felt wrong. Too quiet, too vast, like the breath held before a scream. And then I heard it. The sound, soft, steady, close. The low panting of an animal. I froze. My every nerve screamed to flee, but my body betrayed me. I could only lie there as warmth, wet and rough, dragged across my throat. The realization struck like ice in my veins. Something alive was on top of me. A wolf. It was not imagination, not nightmare. I could feel its weight, the tremor of its breath, the rasp of its tongue. It licked at my skin as though tasting life itself. I dared not move. Instinct screamed, "Stay still, do not provoke it." But the beast sensed me stirring. Slowly its head lifted. From half-closed lashes, I saw it. Two eyes burning like twin coals suspended above me. They glowed with a terrible intelligence, ancient and feral. Its mouth opened slightly, and I caught the flash of its fangs, ivory white beneath the smear of red. The breath that rolled over me was hot, rancid, and alive with hunger. For one suspended heartbeat, I lay there beneath it, half dead, half dreaming, while the living shadow of the wolf watched me, deciding whether I was prey or something else. Darkness claimed me again, thick, absolute, like sinking beneath frozen water. Then sound bled through the void. A growl, deep and guttural. It cut the silence like a blade, followed by a sharp yelp. Then another, and another. My senses stirred. The growl rose again, angry, pained, almost human in its despair. Then, faint and far away, came voices, many of them, calling through the night. Halloa! Halloa! The echo rippled through the storm-torn air. I forced my head to lift, my neck trembling with the effort, but the cemetery wall loomed ahead, blocking my sight. The wolf's cries continued. No longer a predator's roar, but a strange, frantic yelping that grew more rapid, more desperate. Then, from beyond the trees, a flicker of red broke the monotony of white. Torches. They moved like living stars, bobbing and weaving through the veil of snow, casting blood-colored light across the drifts. The sound of hooves followed, a rhythmic pounding growing louder, closer. The air vibrated with it. The wolf stiffened on my chest, its ears pricked. Then, with a sudden, violent movement, it leapt off me and vanished toward the graveyard. I lay gasping, the sudden absence of its weight both a relief and a terror. Through the curtain of storm came the riders. A dozen at least, their torches flaring, their cloaks whipping like wings. Soldiers, by the gleam of metal at their belts and the insignia glinting on their caps. One raised his carbine, sighting straight at me. "Don't shoot!" Another barked, striking at the barrel. A gunshot cracked, echoing into the night. I felt the hiss of the bullet as it passed close above my head, slicing through the darkness. The wolf broke from the shadows, a blur of motion against the snow. Another soldier fired, and the beast vanished among the cypresses, swallowed by the dark. The troop split, half surging toward me, half in pursuit of the fleeing shape. Torches swung wildly, scattering sparks across the wind. Their horses' hooves sent tremors to the frozen ground, and I tried to move, to speak, but my body refused me. Then they were upon me, two dismounted, their boots crunching against the crusted snow. One knelt and pressed a gloved hand to my chest. His voice rang out, bright with relief. "Good news, comrades." His heart still beats. Rough hands tilted my head back. The bitter burn of brandy hit my throat, searing like liquid fire. The warmth flooded me, spreading life back through my veins. My eyes fluttered open. Light and shadow danced across the clearing. The storm dying, the world trembling in the aftermath. I saw figures moving among the graves, their torches painting the marble in hellish hues. They shouted, calling out to one another, voices cracking with disbelief. Then came the sound of men running, dozens of them, bursting out of the cemetery in chaos. Their faces, pale and wild, twisted with fear. They stumbled, gasping, their torches whipping in panic as they rejoined the others. Those around me caught them by the arms, demanding, "What is it? What did you see?" No one answered at first. Only the torches speak, flaring and hissing in the cold air, while the shadows of the graves seemed to lean closer, listening. "Well, have you found him?" The officer's voice cut through the wind like a blade, sharp and urgent. From the darkness beyond the torches came a hurried, uneven chorus. "No, Now, come away. Quick, quick. This is no place to stay. Not tonight. The tone of their fear was contagious. It spread like frost through the ranks, gripping each man's voice in his cold hold. What was it? Someone demanded. The question passed through the group like an echo bouncing off stone, repeated in every register. Angry, trembling, desperate. But no answer came clear. It. Indeed, gibbered one, his eyes glassy, mind broken by what he'd seen. Another's voice quavered. A wolf? And yet, not a wolf. A third, trying for calm but failing, muttered, no use hunting it without a sacred bullet. The officer frowned, his breath steaming in the frigid air. You speak like children frightened by stories. But the fourth soldier snapped back, voice tight with dread. Serve us right for coming out on this night. Walpurgis Night. We've earned our cursed 1,000 marks. Sure enough. Silence fell for a beat, broken only by the groan of trees and the hiss of torches in the icy wind. Then one of the men spoke again, slower this time, as if the words cost him something to say. There was blood on the marble, he said. Fresh blood. The lightning didn't bring that there. He pointed toward the shattered tomb. And for him, he gestured to me. Is he safe? Look at his throat. The beast lay on him, kept his blood warm. All eyes turned to me. I lay half-conscious beneath their scales. The snow around me streaked crimson in the torchlight. The officer crouched, examined my neck, then exhaled. He's all right. No wound, no bite. His gaze flicked toward the ruins of the tomb. What in God's name does it mean? We'd never have found him but for that wolf's cries. The petty officer, steady-handed and unflinching, was the one holding my head. His voice was quiet, measured. What became of it? It went home, came the reply, whispered by a soldier whose face was drained of life. His eyes darted toward the cemetery, to the cracked marble slabs and leaning crosses that glimmered under the moon. There are graves enough there, he added hoarsely, for such a thing to rest. The torches flickered, guttering in the wind. One by one, the men began to back away, their courage collapsing beneath the invisible weight pressing on the night. Come, said the pale one, trembling as he spoke. Let's leave this cursed ground before it calls for more. And as they turned from the graveyard, the wind sighed through the cypresses, long and low, like a wolf's dying breath carried on the chill of Walpurgis Night. The officer lifted me upright, his gloved hand steady at my shoulder as he barked an order. Two soldiers dismounted, their movements sharp, precise. In a blur of motion, they hoisted me onto a horse. The officer vaulted into the saddle behind me, one arm anchoring me in place as his other raised the signal to move. Advance! Our mounts surged forward in disciplined formation, hooves pounding through the snow. Behind us, the grove of cypresses shrank into shadow. Those black, whispering trees guarding the secret we dared not name. The wind howled past, carrying with it the last ghostly echo of the storm. My body swayed with the rhythm of the gallop, numb and weightless. My tongue felt glued to the roof of my mouth. My throat burned when I tried to speak. Then, exhaustion overtook fear. The world blurred into a rush of light and sound. When next I woke, I was standing, upright only by the grip of two soldiers supporting me. Dawn bled slowly over the horizon, a streak of red cutting across the snow like a wound in the sky. The officer's voice carried, low and commanding. Say nothing of what we saw, only this, that we found an Englishman, guarded by a large dog. The man who had trembled most now found his voice again, roughened by daylight and disbelief. Dog? That was no dog. I know a wolf when I see one. I said a dog, the officer replied coolly, not meeting his gaze. The soldier laughed, sharp, uneasy. Dog, eh? Then what do you call that? He pointed to my neck. My hand rose instinctively. A sudden sting flared under my fingertips, and I gasped. The men leaned closer, eyes wide, but the officer's tone didn't waver. A dog, he repeated evenly. Nothing more. Speak of anything else, and we'll be the laughingstock of Bavaria. No one answered. The silence between them was heavier than the snow. Moments later, I was lifted behind another trooper, and we rode through the awakening city. The rooftops silvered with frost, smoke curling from chimneys, unaware of the horrors buried just beyond the hills. We found a carriage near the outskirts, half buried in snowdrift. They eased me inside. The officer dismounted, gave a brief command, and followed me in. One trooper led his horse behind us. The rest turned toward the barracks, their torches fading into dawn. By the time we reached the Countess, the city was alive with morning light. Herr Delbruck was already at the door, eyes wide with anxious relief. He rushed down the steps, clasping my frozen hands. Mein Gott, you are safe, he exclaimed, guiding me inside. The officer saluted, ready to leave, but I stopped him, insisting he join me for a drink. Over a glass of deep red wine, I thanked him, and those who had risked the night to find me. He only smiled faintly. We were glad to serve, he said, and Herr Delbruck made sure every man who rode out was well rewarded. At that, the maitre d'hotel allowed himself a knowing smile, while the young officer, ever the soldier, simply inclined his head, murmured duty, and turned to go. The door closed behind him, and in the quiet that followed, the storm outside seemed very far away, yet its shadow lingered still, cold and watchful, somewhere beyond the sunrise. Herr Delbruck regarded me with a faint smile as I pressed him for answers. But Herr Delbruck, I began. How and why was it that the soldiers searched for me? He gave a modest shrug, as though embarrassed by his own foresight. I was fortunate, he said carefully, to obtain leave from the commander to call for volunteers. I frowned. But how did you even know I was lost? The driver returned here, Delbruck replied, his voice low and deliberate, dragging the splintered remains of his carriage. The horses bolted into the storm. He barely survived the wreck. That alone can't have sent you out into that nightmare, I said. He hesitated, then drew a folded paper from his pocket with gloved fingers. Now, before the coachman returned, this arrived. He handed me the telegram. The thin sheet trembled faintly in my grasp, the ink slightly smeared from the cold. It read, Bistritz, be careful of my guest. His safety is most precious to me. Should aught happen to him, or if he be missed, spare nothing to find him and ensure his safety. He is English and therefore adventurous. There are often dangers from snow and wolves and night. Lose not a moment if you suspect harm to him. I answer your zeal with my fortune. Dracula. As I read the name, the air seemed to thin around me. The walls stretched and wavered, the chandeliers above spitting in my vision like ghostly stars. A chill climbed my spine. Had the maitre d'hotel not caught my arm, I might have collapsed outright. There was something profoundly unreal about it all. This message, its timing, its sender. It was as if I had become the pawn of two unseen powers. Their conflict fought over my very existence. Logic had no place here. The thought took hold of me, slow and inescapable. I was being watched, protected, perhaps, but by what hand, and for what reason, I dared not yet imagine. The telegram crumbled slightly in my fist as I stood in the pale morning light, wondering whether salvation and possession could ever wear the same face. You've just heard Dracula's Guest by Bram Stoker here on Audible Archives. A tale of warding, of footsteps in the snow, and of death's breath too close for comfort. The journey may end at dawn, but the Count's shadow has only just begun to rise. I'm Raul, your host, and if the story's chill lingered with you, don't forget to like, comment and subscribe, because every legend has its beginning, and some doors, once opened, never close again.